have been away for the better part of a week and still have a huge series beginning at Fenway Park. It was a wild weekend in Detroit for the Orioles, avoiding some rain delays on Saturday and getting the best of Ubaldo Jimenez and certainly the best out of Chris Tillman on Sunday. Here to talk all things Tigers and Orioles. He was at Comerica Park all weekend in Motown, covering the Tigers as he does for MLB.com. You can follow his journey on Twitter as well at Beck Jason. That's the opposite. He is Jason Beck of MLB.com, the Tigers beat reporter. What's going on, Jay? Welcome back to the program, man. A wild weekend of real pennant race baseball out there in Detroit.
Yeah, you had a postseason atmosphere here for a couple of days that really kind of resounded, and I think players on both teams really responded to it.
Well, I guess from the Orioles' perspective, we look back and say a lot of folks didn't watch Sunday's game because they were watching the Ravens. Saturday was a blowout, kind of sort of from the beginning. Really, Friday night, Detroit really sort of salvaged the weekend by getting the late run.
Yeah, they were able to capitalize on opposing bullpen, which is something they've done not frequently, but they've done it more times than you would expect. In recent weeks, they've been able to get to some closers and some sort of guys, and they were able to get to Brock on Friday night and really, take what had been a fairly close game and what was a really nice battle between a couple of good young starters there with Fulmer and Gossman.
Well, it's interesting with the 40-man and the expansion. When I think of the Tigers, I think of pretty much a cruddy bullpen. That was sort of the Achilles heel of the whole period of the Scherzer, Verlander, Porcello. It was, if they get out in the seventh, you got trouble late in the games. Feels like the Tigers have tried to shore that part of the thing up, but more than that, just a ton of arms all the way around that they certainly used a bunch of them on Saturday night as Ausmus just sort of took everybody off the field in the seventh inning.
Yeah, I think they were hoping for more out of Jordan Zimmerman in his return from the DL. And once the Orioles hit those 3 home runs off of him, I think that kind of deflated not just the energy out of the ballpark, but I think it took a little bit of something out of the team as well. This is something where, not just for that particular game or even this series, but this is the guy that the Tigers were counting on to give them a boost over the stretch run, hoping that he was finally over some of these neck issues that have basically sidelined him for the better part of 2.5, 3 months. And when they got that start and that quick exit, I think it put them in a little bit more of a bind than just for the weekend series. They're going to have to fill out that rotation with some other guys, at least for the foreseeable future, if not for the rest of the season.
Certainly got a decent look at Verlander, and we've seen him look better, obviously, in his prime, but you see him a whole lot more. One of the real key reasons why the Tigers are very much in this race at this point, why the weekend was kind of wild.
Yeah, and Verlander was saying after the game that, look, I didn't really have my secondary pitches or command of it the way I wanted. And when you go up against a fastball hitting team like Baltimore, with the fastball being really the only pitch you have faith in that you can control, usually you're going to give up even more damage than that. I think in some ways he was a little bit fortunate to only give up the 3 runs on the 2 home runs. He was able to get a huge third out on a pickoff play at second base on a full count, which is something you rarely see. I can't remember the last time I saw a play like that. He was able to get some pitches right off the corner called for strikes, and he was able to get some support from his defense, which really kept the Tigers close. I think in a lot of ways, Chris Tillman vastly outpitched him, but it was able to remain a close game right up until the end.
He is Jason Beck, a longtime Tigers beat reporter out at MLB.com. You can follow his journey out on Twitter as well at Beck Jason. And, I guess for the Tigers to be back in this thing, they were openly talking about Ausmus getting fired, certainly not the kind of start to the season. And the one thing I always say about the Tigers, and I know you and I have talked about this in the past, they got an owner that will spend money, that wants to win really, really badly for legacy reasons as much as anything, especially with what the hockey team's been through there. And this baseball team's been on the cusp of doing it very much in a race. It's amazing with a quick weekend like this, even teams across divisions, how important this series could be. And certainly for the Orioles to pull it out on Sunday, a big victory. But the Tigers are far from buried here at this point.
Right, and I think this is where you can argue in a lot of ways that the Orioles needed to take at least 2 out of 3 in this series, given the difference in the strength of schedules down the stretch. Now the Orioles go back to really what's kind of been a demolition derby in the AL East in recent weeks. I think 17 of their final 20 are against division opponents, although they do have, kind of a little bit of a friendlier 4-game series against the Rays coming up. The Tigers go back to the Central, which is a thinner division right now, and they have 7 games coming up over the next week and a half against the last place Twins. Now, nothing's guaranteed. The Twins came in here and took 2 out of 3 in July, but I think it's a real opportunity to kind of nullify the impact that this series made and claw back into at least the wild card race, if not potentially make some ground up against the first place Indians with a big 3-game series coming up in Cleveland next weekend.
Man, with this many teams in, right? I mean, it's crazy between that. You called it the demolition derby, man. Dude, I'm stealing that. That's stolen. I mean, the last 90 days, I don't know what to call this 3-car race, but certainly the Orioles and the Red Sox. Some thoughts about the Orioles, seeing them over the weekend, doing what we thought they couldn't do, which is kind of pitch their way against a pretty good hitting team to some victories here this weekend. I mean, it's nice to batter out 11. It's nice to hit the ball, but it's even nicer when a Baldo's got the ball in the 7th inning out there and is starting to look like the guy you gave $11 million a year to.
Yeah, I think Jimenez did a very good job of taking advantage of that early lead and pitching to his strengths and not being afraid to make opponents hit the ball and trusting his stuff. That's what you should do when you have a lead like that. Don't give free base runners on walks or anything like that. Make them slug themselves back into the game, and he kept them from doing that. And I think what he's done, really not just this past start, but for a little bit of a while now, is resuscitate his career and loom more and more as a quality late season arm for these guys to consider going into the postseason. I think Tillman, even though it wasn't a lengthy DL stint, looked very, very good for somebody who hadn't pitched in a couple weeks.
I don't think you can ask for more than 105 pitches, right? I mean, and really set up nicely. I mean, Brock having the problems on Friday, Buck goes right back to him. Brock Givens, Britton, and will wait on O'Day and, put the finger in the dike and hold water and get to Boston, right?
Yeah, I think Showalter showed a very good read for his bullpen in being able to go right back to Brock. And also, I thought it was interesting that he went to Britton with a huge lead Saturday night to get him some work and kind of give him some prep work ahead of today's game, which you had to figure was going to be close, and you would probably need Britton at some point during that game as long as the Orioles held a lead. And I think he benefited from that. He didn't show rust. He was able to take advantage of the work, and he got big outs after the Tigers were able to put the potential tying run on base.
He is Jason Beck, covering all things Tigers, who have an easier pathway now, 7 games out in the Central, and just trailing now 2 on the wild card in Kansas City. All right, Kansas City's not dead and buried. And hey, I'll tell you what, it's about the demolition derby in the East. Let's not forget the Yankees at this point, who have now caught the Tigers. I mean, don't forget Houston and Seattle. This is going to be perhaps as exciting a finish for the whole American League over the next 3 weeks that between these football games that we take so seriously here, and I know they do in Detroit as well with the Lions, between these football games, plenty of baseball going on in plenty of places around the country the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of drama set up in the American League, the way just how closely these teams are bunched together. I think it's more so in the East because you have 4 teams in it right now, which is incredible to think, and that 3 could make it, but also that you cross time zones and you've got other teams spread out. So that you have, the Royals on the fringe. You have the Tigers right in the thick of it. You have the upstart Astros who are getting, kind of like the Yankees, significant contributions from young players. That fascinates me too, the blend, the mix of teams that you have. That, you can argue that the Yankees are getting contributions from players that shouldn't know any better as far as the pressure of a playoff race. Some of these guys just got here, and they're making huge impacts to keep the Yankees in it and to get them back in the first place. And the Astros are kind of getting the same thing from kids like Bregman and some of the young pitchers that they have.
Huge for the Orioles to get Tillman back and looking so good on Sunday. But conversely for the Tigers, they leave the weekend now with this Zimmerman conundrum, and certainly going to need him over the next 3 weeks. Some thoughts about where he is and what it looked like on Saturday to you. You've seen more of him, and I know there's grave concern there about when he's going to be able to take the ball for real again.
Yeah, everybody said around the Tigers clubhouse says he's healthy. They're pretty insistent on it. But clearly, the command wasn't there, whether it was health or mechanics or whatever. The command was off. He said something about the arm speed not being up to where he wanted. But when you look at the stops and starts he's made over the past few months, as far as coming back from an injury and then suffering a setback and then having to work your way back up again and start over from stretching out standpoint, he's going to have to find a way to work with a reduced velocity if he's going to make any sort of impact for the Tigers' rotation down the stretch. I think what you see is what you're going to get, and he's going to have to find the sharpness to make it work. The good news for the Tigers is that they have other starters that they can plug in. They already had 5 starters going before this, but it might force them to make some decisions here over the final few weeks that might force Michael Fulmer to get more innings than they want. They've been talking about limiting his workload down the stretch to try to limit how much of an increase he has over last season, given some of the injuries he's had earlier in his professional career. And it also might force him to go to Anibal Sanchez, who has been a little bit of a wild card for them. He's had some effective outings, but he's also a guy who, the third time through the order, has had some trouble to the point where Brad Ausmus has had a quick hook with him. I don't think he's pitched through the 6th inning in his last 3 starts, I believe. And so what you hope for when he takes the mound is that he can give you enough quality innings that you can leave it to your bullpen to take it from there. And as this weekend shows, the bullpen isn't always a safe proposition for these guys. And then beyond that, you've got youngsters and Michael Fulmer, Daniel Norris, and Matt Boyd really pitching in key spots for this team the rest of the way. I don't think there's any way around that unless Zimmerman makes a really miraculous turnaround at this point.
Prosperous week thus far for the Birds on the road. 2 out of 3 in Tampa, 2 out of 3 in Detroit. Jason Beck on the line, longtime beat writer for the Tigers at MLB.com. You can follow his journey out on Twitter at BeckJason, sort of the reverse. Last thing for you on the Tigers. When I think of them, obviously I think of the Martinez guys, but Cabrera, and to sort of neutralize him over the weekend, whether it was Jimenez or whether it was Tillman, Gausman on Friday night, when you keep him quiet and drop 15 points from his average in a couple of games, you're probably going to have more success than not. He's always been a troublemaker.
Yeah, and I thought they did a tremendous job pitching the game plan they had against him. It seemed like that they wanted to get him chasing the high fastball a little bit, that they felt like they could get him out of his comfort zone that way, and that they also were able to pitch in. Now, a lot of teams have gone in with similar game plans, but it's another thing to execute it with precision. And that's what all 3 of the Orioles starters did, and I was really impressed the way they did that. They neutralized the impact he could have with the bat. They kept him from getting his arms extended and making solid contact, and they got into his head a little bit with some of the strike zones. So I think Buck Showalter and the pitchers involved deserve a ton of credit for being able to not just formulate the game plan, but execute it with some accuracy there. It's not easy to do, as I think Cabrera's shown over the years, but these guys pulled it off. He hadn't had a hitless series, which he's played all 3 games since the end of May. So we're talking a good 3.5 months now that he's been able to make an impact of some sort, and they neutralized him.
I tell you, I'm not a betting man, but if I were out in Vegas right now, I wonder what it would look like on the board. What kind of odds would you have to give me right now on the Yankees or Kansas City or Seattle to make the playoffs? They all look like stalking horses, but the more you look at a game or 2 games over a 3-week stretch, then you start looking at schedules, then you start looking at health, then you start looking at hey, is Tillman going to be able to go? Where's Zimmerman and all this? For all of these teams, obviously Texas is in, Cleveland is in, everybody else, I mean, including Boston, even with their lead right now, very much in peril. Jason, your thoughts on the Tigers right now? Are they going to get in the playoffs in your mind?
I think they still have a pretty decent shot. I think given the way the schedule works out, the veteran talent that they have, and even without Zimmerman, I think the rotation is strong enough that while they don't control the run rate technically, I think it's in their hands. That they can put a ton of pressure on these other teams by doing what they should do with their schedule. And that if they take care of their own business, they have reason to believe that just the topsy-turvy nature of the AL East and some of the other issues that some of these other teams are going through should put them in a position to take over one of those two wild card spots at some point here down the stretch.
Yeah, we're going to be beating each other up one way or another. Somebody's got to lose here the next couple of days at Fenway Park, right?
Right. And the thing is with this race, there's no really perfect teams left in it. The perfect teams are leading their divisions. Texas and Cleveland are they're close to perfect teams.
Well, the Cubs are perfect. Just ask any Cubs fan.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about flawed teams really all the way around to some degree in some area. And so it's going to come down to, can these teams take advantage of their strengths and be able to kind of mask the imperfections that they have?
Hey, really appreciate you taking a little time and coming on. I know it was a wild weekend out there. We've got football on the brain here. I know they're watching the Lions out there as well. But baseball's still giving us a charge this time of year. And 9 teams vying for 5 spots. Going to be some feelings hurt in a couple of these places. We're just hoping it's not here. And off the Fenway Park, while you guys are beating up on the Minnesota Twins, you got the Braves on the schedule yet. I know the Oriole fans are looking forward to that Arizona series. We played the Arizona Diamondbacks the last week of the season. Who makes these schedules up, Jay?
It's weird the way interleague play has kind of been spread out over the course of the entire schedule. The Tigers are in a weird position. They open and close the season at National League parks without the DH, and this is a team that's got a 37-year-old DH in Victor Martinez. So I know every team's got to go through it to some degree, but to have it on the bookends kind of stands out.
Always great to have you on and check in with you, man. Sorry I didn't get you on before the series, but great to wrap it up with you. A decent weekend of baseball if you were watching. He is Jason Beck of MLB.com. He covers the Tigers out. There's also a huge Chelsea supporter watching a little Euro League soccer there as well. You can find me on the Bayou Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We come in crystal clear from wherever you are, anywhere in the world. Our morning newspaper hits your email inbox at 7 a.m. each and every morning. It is powered up by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. Still $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life there. We're going to be doing some Ravens players swabbing beginning next week. I'm going to have a little schedule by the end of this week at Greenmount Station as well as up at Adams Jeep in Aberdeen. So stay tuned for all of that. And, of course, any breaking news that happens first on the WNST Tech Service. That is brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. Dennis will be here on Thursday driving you home, getting you ready for Thursday night football. And the Orioles don't play on Thursday, but of course at Fenway all week. We got a homecoming. I have 2 power blogs on the Orioles attendance issues coming this week at WNST.net, so you'll want to find that and follow along as well. I'm on Facebook Live. I'm on WNSTV Live, streaming on our YouTube channel, as well as on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, and anywhere the internet goes. I'm Nestor. This is WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Taos in Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.